Hi Math 8 students, I hope that you had a good weekend. It is Monday, April 27th, and I'm here to give you your next lesson, which is 12.3. Now, I sent an email home to you that had 4 worksheets that we're going to do in class today. So I have them on the overhead and we will do them together. So let's say a prayer. Father in heaven, we just thank you so much for this day. I pray for all of my students to focus and to learn very well, and that they would have great success in lesson 12.3. And I pray for myself that you would strengthen me and help me to use words and to be the very best teacher I can be. In Jesus' name. Okay, so let's get started. Please have your worksheets out. This lesson is about different types of graphs. So we're going to look at bar graphs, line graphs, and pie graphs. So the first worksheet that you should have is called Career Preferences of Middle School Students. So what we're basically going to do is just look at the bar graph and answer some questions to go with it. In this chapter, you have to do some interpreting of graphs, but you also have to create some graphs. They're not very hard. You'll be totally fine with this. Most of you have probably had experience with all these type of graphs before. And this is the last lesson we're doing in chapter 12. We're going to start chapter 13 on Wednesday. So chapter 12, part of chapter 12 and part of chapter 13 will be put together to be the last test. So we're doing part of one and part of the other. Okay, so let's look at this. What is the most popular career? Well, obviously you've got your number of students here that are being surveyed, and you have the different career choices. Now, a bar graph is really good for showing different categories of things and subjects. And so having different categories, a teacher, a doctor, a sportsman, they are not numbers, they are things, okay? And it's a really good tool for comparing different numbers. So the most popular career chosen by these middle school students was teacher, obviously. Whoa! This is going to be interesting writing on here. So let's put teacher here. If it will let me. It won't. It's not letting me. Let's try putting it up here. No, it won't. Okay. Let's see. How about over here? Well, this is just getting interesting now, isn't it? Let's see. Maybe over here? No. How about way up high up here? Well, does that end up in the right place? T. That only went down one. T. Sure. This is hilarious. Okay, well, if you can read that, I think you're in a good place. Okay, T-E-A-C-E-C-H-E-R. I know how to spell. All right, so that's the answer to number 1. I'm not writing on this now. Okay, what is the least popular career? Well, obviously, that would be scientist. So we want to write scientist down for number 2. Which careers do 30 students prefer? So the number of students is over here, and we can see if we go across, that would be sportsman. So right there is sportsman, and that's at 30. And it is 30, not 20, even though it keeps trying to tell me. All right, let's put it above. There we go. All right. And the last one says, name all the career choices for students. Well, actually, I only see 5. They said 6. Oh, there's one that didn't even come out. We also have lawyer. So you want to write down all the names of our different careers at the bottom. So that would be teacher, lawyer, doctor, sportsman, actor, and scientist. Okay, this is going to prove interesting for the next one. We're going to go up here, and we're going to create a bar graph. So what we do is it says, Happy Rhythms Music Store tracks the data on their sales of musical instruments. Draw a bar graph to represent the data and answer the questions. Okay, so here I have guitar and I have 630. So 630 would be about right where? This is 610. It's hard for me to read on here. It probably is for you too. Oh, it went up by 90s. So 630 is right here. So you want to draw a bar graph right there. Okay. For trumpet, it's 720. So under trumpet, we would put this. For drum, it's 405. And that's not exact. So that's about halfway between 360 and 450. Saxophone was 540. Okay. And piano is also 405. So you should make a bar graph that looks something like this. And you can color those in nicely, maybe with a colored pen. Okay, so that's a bar graph. And then that is a visual representation of these numbers, and it makes it easy to draw some conclusions about our data. So the first question says, how many more guitars than drums were sold? So we would take guitar would be 630, and we would subtract drums, which is 405, and you get 225, I believe. No, 630 minus 405 is 225. Yep. Okay. What two instruments have equal sales? Well, that's easy. You can see drum and piano have the same number. What is the difference between trumpets and saxophones? So that would be 720 minus the saxophone, which is 540. And that is 180. Okay. How many instruments were sold in all? Well, we'd have to total them all up. So in all means the total. And a total means that you add them all together, and we get 2,700. Okay. That's nice. Someone just burped in the kitchen. I'll just say, excuse you.
Sorry.
That's all right. Okay. So let's go down to the pie chart. Let's do the other one first. Let's go by the pie chart and find the line graph. Okay. Kim and his family often watch movies at home. The data shows the number of movies watched by them between 2008 and 2012. Draw a line graph to represent the data. Okay, so a line graph is a really good type of graph to use over time. So for any kind of measurement over time. So in 2008, that's years, and the number of movies, we're going to put a dot right there. 2009 was at 12. 2010 was at 10. 2011 is at 14. And 2012 was at 18. Okay, so we draw all our dots, and then we connect those. I don't know what 2007 was, so I'm just going to start here. And you can see what the trend is, if there is one. Sometimes it's that things don't change. Here you can see that over time they're watching more and more movies at home, which would make sense because movies are easily accessible more so at home as time goes on. And also movies are getting more and more expensive in the movie theater. So anyway, that's what a line graph is. Okay, so let's go down now to the pie graph. Now on your test, you might have to do a draw a bar graph or a line graph. You only would have to interpret a pie graph. We're not making them in this class this year. So we just have to know how to answer the question. So here Adam's family has $7,000 a month in expenses, and he made a pie chart on his expenses for food, housing, saving, clothing, entertainment, and miscellaneous. Read the pie graph and answer the questions. Okay, so let's go down here. How much money does he spend for clothing and entertainment? Okay, well, I have 11% for clothing and 13% for entertainment. So I'm going to have 11% of 7,000. Well, what is that? Well, to change a percent to a decimal, I divide by 100. And of means multiply. So when I multiply 7,000 by 0.11, I get 770. So that is for clothing. Okay, now that's not the whole answer. Be careful. You have to look and see if when you get an answer, if that is what they're asking for. Hang on one second. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to have 13% of 7,000, which means 0.13 times 7,000, and that is 0.13 times 7, 1, 2, 3. 9, 10. Okay. So when I add those together, I get $1,680 a month for clothing and entertainment. Okay, I want to go live at his house. That sounds pretty good. Okay. Other than housing, how much money does he have for other expenses? Well, let's see. Housing is 27%. So we want to know what everything else is. So the total we know is 7,000, right? So if I find out what housing is, then I can subtract that from the total. So let's see, housing was 27%. So I have 27% of 7,000, which is 0.27 times 7,000. And that is 1,890. Now, is that my answer? No. The answer is what other expenses are. But I need that because other than housing. So I'm going to take 7,000 and subtract housing. And let's see what I get. $5,110. So for every other expense, it's over $5,000. But housing actually at 27%, you didn't probably know this, that's very common for people to spend about between 25 and 30% of their income on the cost of where they live. Okay, number 3. How much money is his family's food expense? Well, let's see. Food is 34%. I'm sure you're seeing a pattern now of how to answer these questions. So we have 34%, which is 0.34 times 7,000. And that is 2,380. Okay, now what I want you to do is go ahead and try number 4 and number 5 by yourself. Number 5 is a little bit tough. So please pause the video and we'll come back and go over it in just a moment. All right, so let's go over these. Did he save any money? Well, let's see. savings is 6%. So 6% of $7,000 is, don't forget to move the decimal over too. That works out to be $420. Okay. He allotted 1/3 of expenses of housing to miscellaneous expenses. Is that true? Well, let's find out. Housing was $5,110. Okay? 1/3 of that. Well, let's see. What is 1/3 of that amount? If I figure that out, 5,110 divided by 3 is about $1,703. Okay, well, I'm comparing that to miscellaneous. So I'm going to go back up here and see miscellaneous is 9%. So what is 9% of 7,000? If you multiply those, you get $6,300. Are these the same? No. So that statement is false. Do you see how we use the information from the circle graph to answer questions? And you can look at this and you can learn a lot about Adam's family. What's important to them? Obviously, housing and food make up more than half of their budget. Honestly, I think a lot of money is being spent on clothing and entertainment. There is no giving here, so that's not a priority. You can just learn a lot about them. Savings, they care about preparing for the future. So anyway, those are some of the things that we learn from a circle graph. Okay, now, I think I have a blank page here. Do I? No. All right. Let's just go to this. I want to talk about, in lesson 12.3, you can just turn over one of the worksheets or use your notebook. This is very, very important. This will be on your test. What types of graph you use for different situations. So it's really important to be able to interpret a graph, but let's say you have data and you want to display it to communicate what the numbers are and to show certain trends or lack of trends. Well, each different type, whether it's a line graph, a pie graph, a bar graph, a stem and leaf plot, a box and whisker, they all have the best times to use them. They have the most optimum way to use them. So we're going to write that down. Okay, so when do we use a circle graph? You use a circle graph to represent data as part of a whole. Okay, if you look at our circle graph that we had, it was several different parts like this. All of them added up, all the percentages, they added up to 100%. Sometimes you have data that doesn't add up to the whole or to 100%. In this case, it does. So it's really an easy way to see, like our graph that we had. This was the housing, looked about like that on our graph. So you can see out of all the money, what chunk looks like that it's spent. And it looks like it's just over 25%, and that's very big. Okay, so that's when we use a circle graph. The next one is a line graph, and we talked about this. We use a line graph when we're displaying data over time. If you're showing a change or lack of change, what data does in years, in months, in seconds, in decades, all different time frames. That's when you want to use a line graph. Okay? A stem and leaf plot. When do we use that? Let's see. To order a set. To order a data set. Or to show how the numbers are distributed. For instance, let's say we have data that looks like this. I'm just making this up. Like this. What can you tell about how that data is distributed? Well, you can tell that most of the numbers, whatever they represent, are in the 30s. The least amount is in the teens. And there's a significant number in the 20s. Okay? So you can tell a lot about how the numbers are distributed when you use a stem and leaf plot. Okay, how about box and whisker? When do you use that? You want to show distribution also. But you're using the quartiles, the median, and extremes. Okay? So that's when we use box and whisker. All right, a bar graph, we already talked about this, is used to display data in distinct categories. Like we had different types of instruments. Those are things. It was a piano or a trumpet or a guitar. Those are very distinct. They're very different. Or different careers. We looked at doctor, lawyer, actor. They were all very distinct and different. So that's when you want to use a bar graph. Now a histogram, we haven't really talked much about a histogram. We made them in the first chapter. I don't know if you remember. Chapter 1, I believe, it was one of the very first things we did. Interpreting graphs, there it is. And it's all histograms, a lot of them. A histogram shows frequency of data. So how often does a particular number come up? So you have a bar graph that looks like this, right? Now a histogram looks similar, but here's some differences. A histogram has all of the bars touching. So do you see the differences there? Now, the histogram is going to be numbers here. How often is a certain number coming up? So it might be, what are the rolls of a dice? How often do you roll a certain number of dice? What's someone's favorite number between 1 and 10? And then you have results, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's frequency of data. That's when you use this. That's when you have these frequency categories like this, okay, in equal intervals. So you can say bar graphs are for things and histograms are for numbers. Sorry, this is kind of messy. Histogram are for numbers. Okay, and that's all we're going to look at for now. This is very important. This will be on your test. Most of your tests for Chapter 12 will be multiple choice, okay? And you need to know when to use. There are several questions on when to use different types of graphs. So you must know this. This is very important. You must be able to read different types of graphs. And you might have to know how to draw a line graph or a bar graph. Okay, so that's it. I will send your homework home, and I hope that you have a great Monday night. Bye now.